Hi, Mrs. H Psychology. This is for paper 2. It's a behaviourist question, classical conditioning applied to a STEM. So a very standard question. It's come up time and time again over the past X number of years. Classical conditioning applied to a specific scenario. Okay, here it is. It's about a woman being afraid of balloons and having to use classical conditioning to explain that. So key things you would always say with classical conditioning, these are the 3 things you should always start with. Classical conditioning is always about reflexive behaviours, so reflexes we're born with. For example, we could say a fear response or a vomiting response, something like that. Classical conditioning is always about pairing a neutral stimulus with that reflex, and therefore you learn to associate the two together. So if we look at our standard template, always worth jotting this down but making sure you're accurate. It's unconditioned stimulus to begin with, leads to unconditioned response. Unconditioned stimulus plus that neutral stimulus, unconditioned response, and conditioned stimulus at the end, then after a few pairings or sometimes just one pairing, becomes the conditioned response. If in doubt, it's useful for you to start with the bottom, go with whatever that it is that the person is afraid of. And that will be, so for example, in this case, it's going to be balloon leads to fear response. And the balloon is always, the new thing is the neutral stimulus. We're not born afraid of balloons, we're not born afraid of dogs, we're not born afraid of pigeons, etc. But we learn those through different means. And here, that neutral stimulus would be the pigeon or the dog or the hospital or whatever it is that the person's become afraid of. So that's always going to be your conditioned one. It's going to be fear or another reflex like vomiting, something like that. So we know what most of that line is going to be, and the unconditioned thing is just the thing we have to work out. So why would somebody become afraid of a balloon? Well, it's going to be the loud noise most likely. So let's apply it to this one. Okay, so the loud noise becomes fear. Loud noise plus the balloon, which is the neutral, becomes fear, and therefore the conditioned stimulus is the balloon, then becomes fear. And I would recommend that you put in a line like this. So a new fear response has been associated with the original neutral stimulus, in this case the balloon. Okay, let's have a look at the MART scheme for this from one particular paper. So this is what they had in the MART scheme. There's some information, but spot the mistake. Something in here that isn't quite right. So just pause the video and have a look and see what you think. Okay, so after you've paused it, hopefully you've spotted that actually at this stage it shouldn't be a conditioned stimulus, that should be neutral stimulus that's led to the unconditioned fear response. Okay, so this is correct. Unconditioned stimulus is the loud noise, but it should be paired up with a neutral stimulus, we should call it, not a conditioned stimulus, so watch out for that. Okay, otherwise that's fine.